The rain fell in steady sheets as I pulled up to the hotel. I was drenched by the time I stepped inside, though the warmth of the lobby didn't ease the chill that settled deep in my bones. The place was grand, old and full of history. Dark wood paneling, ornate chandeliers, and a front desk clerk who greeted me with a smile that felt as out of place as I did. "Room 312, he said, handing me the key. Not a key card, a real key, with an oversized brass number dangling from it. I tried not to think too much about how strange that felt. The hotel had charm, I told myself, a throwback to a different time. Maybe that's what I needed, a place stuck in time, so I didn't have to think about my own past. The elevator creaked as it took me to the third floor. The hallway was long and dimly lit, the carpet thick and worn in places. I found the door to my room and turned the key. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a strange weight press against me. The room was smaller than I expected, cozy in a way that was almost suffocating. But what caught my attention immediately was the mirror. It was enormous, an ornate piece that took up nearly the entire wall above the dresser. The frame was dark wood, carved with intricate designs, giving it an antique feel that fit the room. But the mirror itself, something about it seemed off. The glass was clean, polished to perfection, but as I looked at my reflection, I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable. I shook off the sensation and dropped my bag on the bed. I had come here to clear my head, to get away from everything. It was supposed to be a retreat, a chance to breathe. Yet, I couldn't stop my eyes from drifting back to the mirror. At first, it seemed normal. Just a reflection of the room and me, standing awkwardly in the center. But as I moved to unpack, I noticed something strange. My reflection lingered for a fraction of a second too long, like a glitch in a video. I blinked and looked again. Everything seemed fine. Maybe it was the tiredness catching up with me. I'd been running on empty for weeks, and this trip was supposed to fix that. Ignoring the unease, I unpacked, changing into something dry and more comfortable. But the feeling of being watched lingered, and each time I glanced at the mirror, I could swear the reflection wasn't quite right. The room around me looked darker. I thought it might be the lighting, but the reflection didn't match the atmosphere of the room. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring into the glass, watching as the flickers became more pronounced. My reflection didn't just lag now, it seemed distorted. My face twisted slightly, like a funhouse mirror, warping and bending in subtle but unnerving ways. It wasn't dramatic, but it was just enough to unsettle me. I got up and moved toward the mirror, my heart pounding in my chest. I waved my hand in front of it. The reflection followed, perfectly normal. But then I blinked, and for a moment, I saw something else, something dark and twisted. My face, but wrong. The expression wasn't mine. It was cruel, mocking. I stepped back, my breath catching in my throat. What the hell? I whispered to no one. My pulse quickened, and I rubbed my eyes, trying to shake the growing dread creeping up my spine. I told myself it was all in my head, that I was tired, and the strange atmosphere of the hotel was just playing tricks on me. But when I looked again, the reflection had returned to normal, or close enough that I couldn't tell the difference. That night, I tried to ignore the mirror as I settled into bed. The rain outside intensified, tapping against the window like fingers trying to get in. I turned away from the mirror, but I could still feel it. An unshakable awareness that it was there, watching. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined that distorted face looking back at me, twisted with malice. My own reflection, mocking me from the other side of the glass. In the early hours of the morning, I woke with a start. My heart was racing, and sweat soaked my sheets. I turned toward the mirror, and for a moment, my blood ran cold. My reflection wasn't moving. I stared at it, wide-eyed, frozen. And it stared back, still. Then, slowly, It began to move, but it wasn't following my movements. It smiled. A slow, wicked grin that didn't belong to me. My body shook with terror, and I reached for the lamp on the nightstand, flicking it on. The light filled the room, and suddenly, the reflection snapped back to normal. My face, pale and fearful, stared back at me. I sat there, breathing heavily, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I didn't know if I was losing my mind or if something far worse was happening in that room. But deep down, I knew one thing. Whatever was in that mirror, it wasn't just a reflection. The next morning, I woke up to a gray, overcast sky outside my window. My body felt heavy, as though the weight of last night had followed me into my sleep. I glanced at the mirror. It looked normal, too normal. I tried to convince myself it had all been a bad dream, but deep down, I knew that wasn't true. I spent the day trying to avoid the room. I wandered the halls of the hotel, feeling out of place among the few guests I passed. No one met my gaze. It was as if we were all stuck in our own worlds, barely aware of each other. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with this place. The whispers from the staff were strange, but whenever I tried to focus on them, they would stop. By the afternoon, I returned to my room, exhaustion catching up with me. I had hoped the daylight would make things feel different, safer even. But as soon as I stepped inside, the mirror drew my attention again. It was like gravity pulling me toward it. I stood in front of it, my heart racing. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help it. My reflection stared back at me, blank-faced, just as I expected. For a moment, I thought I might be imagining everything, that the previous night was a product of stress. I waved my hand in front of the mirror, just to be sure, and my reflection followed. Perfectly normal. But then, it didn't. I blinked, and in that instant, my reflection froze. My heart stopped. I waved my hand again. Nothing. My reflection remained still, eyes locked on mine, lips curling into a sinister grin that wasn't mine. My chest tightened with fear, and I took a step back. Then it moved. Not with me, against me. My reflection tilted its head, observing me like a predator sizing up its prey. My body felt like it was being pulled toward the glass, an invisible force drawing me closer. My pulse quickened, and panic rose in my throat. I couldn't resist. My hand lifted, fingers trembling as they hovered just an inch from the glass. The surface was cold, freezing cold. The room darkened around me, the air thickening with something oppressive, something alive. And then I felt it, a pull. Before I could react, the world around me warped. The room disappeared in a blur, and suddenly I was somewhere else. I was still standing in front of the mirror, but the room was different. It wasn't my room anymore. The colors were muted, as if drained of life, and the air felt dense, suffocating. My reflection was gone, replaced by nothing but the empty room behind me. I turned around, but it was too late. I wasn't in my room at all. I was in a version of it, something darker, something twisted, and it wasn't just the room that had changed. My life had too. I heard voices in the distance, familiar but wrong. I recognized them, people from my past, people I had hurt. Their words echoed through the walls, accusing, angry. I tried to leave, to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. Panic surged in me as the memories of my worst decisions unfolded before me. This was no nightmare. It was real, too real. The mirror wasn't just showing me a reflection. It was showing me what I feared most. A world where every mistake I'd made had ruined everything. I had to get out. I ran to the door, pounding on it, but the walls felt like they were closing in. The air grew thicker, and I could barely breathe. I screamed, but my voice seemed to vanish into the suffocating space. Then, suddenly, I saw him. Another guest, standing in the hallway, staring into a mirror of his own. His face was pale, eyes hollow. He didn't even acknowledge me as I screamed for help. It was as if he was lost, trapped in his own nightmare. Just like me, there was no escape. Not yet. The walls felt like they were closing in as I stood in that twisted version of my room. Everything was wrong, distorted in ways that unsettled me to my core. The air was thick, suffocating, like it was alive and feeding on my fear. I rushed to the door again, yanking the handle, but it refused to budge. I was trapped. Behind me, the mirror shimmered faintly, like it was watching. I turned back to it, hoping for a way out, but instead, I saw something worse. A version of myself, standing in the room beyond the glass. But this version of me wasn't just a reflection. It was cruel, broken, twisted by every bad choice I had ever made. Suddenly, I heard voices. They weren't in the room, but they felt close, surrounding me. Voices of people I had known, people I had wronged. They whispered accusations, the weight of their anger pressing down on me like a heavy burden. I recognized each one, and the memories came flooding back. Choices I tried to forget, people I'd pushed away, all surfacing at once. I backed away from the mirror, the voices growing louder. I covered my ears, but it did nothing to block out the noise. Every mistake I'd made was being laid bare, replaying in my head like a film I couldn't shut off. And the mirror, it showed me those moments. Flashes of my life, but not how I remembered it. Worse, darker. I saw myself in those moments, but twisted versions of events played out. My selfish choices magnified into something monstrous. A decision to walk away from someone became abandonment. A lie I told grew into betrayal. Every regret was amplified, cruelly twisted into something I could barely recognize. I turned from the mirror, desperate to escape the onslaught of regret. I stumbled through the room, my vision blurring, the walls seeming to shift and warp around me. My heart raced as I tried to find a way out, but every door I opened led to another version of the same room, the same suffocating space, the same accusations echoing in my head. Then I saw him again, the man from before, the one lost in his own mirror. This time, he wasn't in the hallway. He was in my room, standing silently in front of a mirror I hadn't noticed before. His eyes were empty, and he didn't seem to see me. His reflection in the glass was even worse than mine. Deformed, a grotesque version of himself that looked like it had been rotting from the inside out. I reached out to him, trying to get his attention, but the moment I touched him, he crumbled to the floor. I stepped back, horrified. His body dissolved into ash, scattering into the air, leaving nothing behind but an empty suit of clothes. My hand shook as I stared at the pile on the floor. I was alone. There was no one left in this place, no one to help me. The walls shifted again, narrowing, pressing closer. The air grew colder, and I could feel the weight of the hotel closing in. The mirror loomed behind me, and I knew what it wanted. To trap me like it had trapped the others. To feed on my mistakes, to keep me in this twisted reality forever. I had to get out. But there was no door, no escape. Only the mirror, watching, waiting. The walls seemed to pulse with life as I stood in the suffocating room, trapped between the mirrors and the crushing weight of my own regrets. I needed to get out, but every attempt only led me back to the same room, as if the hotel itself was keeping me in a loop. The mirrors followed me. No matter where I turned, they were always there, waiting, showing me pieces of my life I wanted to forget. Then something clicked. The mirrors weren't just reflections. They were gateways. They weren't just showing me my mistakes. They were feeding off them, warping my reality, trapping me in my worst choices. The hotel wasn't just a place to stay. It was alive. It was using the mirrors to prey on its guests, trapping them in endless cycles of regret and misery. I remembered the man who had crumbled into ash, the hollow look in his eyes, the way he seemed lost in his own reflection. How many others had been swallowed by this place? How long had the hotel been feeding on people like me, drawing them in, making them live out their worst fears. The thought made my stomach turn. I had to get out, and fast, before I became just another victim of the hotel's twisted hunger. But how? Every door led back to the same room, and every mirror seemed to pull me deeper into this nightmare. Suddenly, I heard something, a faint sound, like a whisper. At first, I thought it was another trick of the hotel, another voice taunting me, but this was different. It was coming from down the hallway. I followed the sound, moving quickly, though every step felt like I was walking through molasses, the air thick and heavy around me. As I rounded the corner, I saw it. A mirror at the end of the hall, different from the others. It shimmered, its surface almost rippling like water. The whispering grew louder, more urgent, like it was calling me. I hesitated, unsure if I could trust it, but I had no other choice. I approached the mirror, my heart pounding. I touched the glass, expecting to be pulled into another twisted version of my past, but instead, the surface melted away, revealing something else, a glimpse of the hotel's truth. I saw flashes, guests like me, trapped in their rooms, lost in their own reflections. Some screaming, others silent, all of them consumed by the mirrors. And behind it all, the hotel, watching, waiting. The hotel wasn't just alive, it was feeding on us. The mirrors weren't just gateways. They were traps, designed to keep us here, feeding the hotel's endless hunger for misery and regret. No one had escaped. Not really. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no getting out, not unless I broke the hotel's hold on me. But how? I couldn't fight it physically. It was too powerful. It controlled everything in this place. I took a step back, my mind racing. The only way out was to face it head on, to confront my darkest regrets, the worst parts of myself, and refuse to let them control me. The hotel thrived on our fear, our shame. If I could face it, if I could accept my past without letting it destroy me, maybe, just maybe, I could break free. But I wasn't sure I had the strength. The mirror shimmered again, waiting. I stood in front of the mirror, its surface rippling like water, daring me to come closer. My pulse hammered in my ears, and the weight of the hotel's power pressed down on me, a suffocating force that seemed to squeeze the air from my lungs. I knew what I had to do, but it terrified me. The only way out was to confront the reflection I had been running from, the worst version of myself. My hand trembled as I reached out, fingers brushing the cold surface of the glass. This time, there was no sudden shift, no jarring pull into another reality. Instead, the reflection came to life. It moved, stepping forward until it stood just inches from me. But this wasn't me, at least, not the me I knew. It was a version of myself that I had always feared I could become. Cruel, selfish, broken. It stared back at me, its eyes dark and hollow, lips twisted into a sneer. "You can't escape," it whispered, the voice low and mocking. "You know what you are. You've always known." I tried to back away, but the room seemed to close in around me. The mirror loomed larger, and my reflection followed, moving closer, its presence suffocating. It was as if the hotel was amplifying everything, the guilt, the shame, the regret, until it became unbearable. "You made your choices," the reflection hissed, its face contorting into something grotesque. "You ruined everything. This is who you are." I wanted to scream, to run, but there was no escape. Every mistake, every failure, every moment of weakness was being laid bare before me. My reflection showed me the life I could have had if I had given in to my worst instincts. If I had hurt the people I loved, abandoned them, destroyed everything I cared about. It stepped forward again, its cold breath brushing against my skin. "You belong here," it said, its voice now a low growl. "This is where you've always belonged." I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart racing. I couldn't deny the truth of what it was saying. These were all things I had buried deep, things I didn't want to face. But if I gave in, if I accepted this twisted version of myself, the hotel would claim me, just like it had claimed all the others. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stand my ground. "No," I whispered, my voice shaking. "You're not me. You're just a reflection, a version of me that could have been. But I'm not you." The reflection snarled, its face distorting even more, but I held firm. My chest tightened with fear, but I pushed it down. The hotel thrived on fear. It wanted me to believe that I was trapped, that I was nothing more than my regrets. But I wasn't. "I made mistakes," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I hurt people, but that doesn't define me." The reflection glared at me, its eyes burning with anger. I could feel the hotel's grip tightening, the walls pressing in, but it didn't back down. I wouldn't let it win. "I'm more than my worst decisions," I said, staring the reflection down. "I'm not perfect, but I won't be trapped by this." For a moment, the reflection wavered, its form flickering like static. I could feel the hotel resisting, trying to hold me, but something had shifted. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. The reflection screamed, a sound that seemed to shake the walls, but it was fading. I took a step forward, my hand still on the mirror. The glass cracked under my touch, a jagged line spreading across its surface. The hotel trembled, and the reflection shattered, dissolving into nothing. I stood there, breathless, staring at the broken mirror. The room was still, silent. The hotel's grip had loosened, but I knew it wasn't over yet. The silence in the room was suffocating. The shattered mirror hung before me, its broken shards scattered across the floor, glinting under the dim light. My reflection, twisted, cruel, was gone, but the weight of the hotel's presence still pressed down on me, as if it wasn't ready to let me go. I took a step back, my legs shaky, my breath coming in ragged bursts. I had faced the worst part of myself, shattered the illusion the mirror had shown me, but the room didn't feel any different. The hotel still felt alive, still feeding on the misery it had dredged up. It hadn't let go. I turned toward the door, desperation setting in. I needed to get out of here. Now, I grabbed the handle and twisted. It gave way, opening with a creak. The hallway stretched out before me, long and dark, flickering lights casting shadows that seemed to dance across the walls. I stumbled into the corridor, my heart racing. Everything felt wrong. The air was thick with tension, like the hotel was angry, furious that I had broken free of its control. I moved quickly, my footsteps echoing against the empty walls. The hotel seemed to shift around me, the hallways twisting and bending, as if trying to trap me again. Every corner I turned led to another stretch of identical halls, a maze that seemed endless. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The mirrors along the walls watched me as I passed, but they didn't pull me in. Not anymore. Their power had weakened. I could feel the hotel trying to grasp at me, trying to drag me back into the nightmare, but it was slipping. I had broken its hold, and it was desperate to regain control. I rounded another corner, and there it was, a door. Different from the others. Large, dark wood, and slightly ajar. My chest tightened with hope, a flicker of escape. I approached cautiously, my hand trembling as I pushed it open. On the other side was the lobby, just as grand and imposing as it had been when I arrived. The chandeliers cast their golden light across the polished floors, and the front desk sat unmanned. Everything looked the same, but something had shifted. The air felt different, lighter, freer. I took a deep breath, the tension easing slightly from my body. I crossed the lobby, the exit in sight. My pulse quickened as I reached the large, heavy front doors. I placed my hand on the cool metal handle, ready to push them open and step back into the world outside. Freedom was just a step away. But I hesitated. A shadow moved in the corner of my vision. I turned, my breath catching in my throat. There, across the lobby, stood a figure. Dressed in old, tattered clothes, they were staring into one of the lobby mirrors. Their bodies still, their face hidden from view. It was another guest, just like the man I had seen before. Frozen, lost. For a moment, I wanted to help them, to pull them away from the mirror's grip. But then the hotel shifted again, the lights flickering, and I knew I couldn't stay. Not if I wanted to make it out. The hotel would always find new victims. There would always be someone else trapped in its web of regret and misery. I turned back to the door, steeling myself. I pushed it open, the cool night air rushing against my face, and stepped out into the darkness. The cold night air hit my skin like a splash of ice water, jolting me awake from the nightmare I had just escaped. My heart was still racing, but the feeling of being free, truly free, gave me a sense of relief I hadn't felt in what seemed like days. I turned to look at the hotel. Dark, looming, its windows like empty eyes watching me leave. It was over. I was out. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from my chest. My body still trembled, and my legs felt weak, but I had made it. The hotel had lost its grip on me. The mirror's twisted reality was behind me, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe again. I started walking down the empty street, my footsteps echoing softly in the night. There was no sign of life. No cars, no lights from nearby buildings. Just the hotel at my back and the open road ahead. Everything seemed still, too still. But I kept moving, not daring to look back. As I walked, I tried to piece together what had happened. The hotel, the mirrors, the reflections. It didn't make sense. None of it did. How could a place like that exist? A place that fed on the darkest parts of people, trapping them in their worst nightmares? I shook my head, trying to push the thoughts away. It didn't matter anymore. I was free. Or so I thought. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the lingering sense of unease, or the nagging feeling that something was still wrong. But after a few minutes, I found myself slowing down, my footsteps faltering. Against my better judgment, I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned around. The hotel was there, just as dark and imposing as before. But there was something else, something that made my blood run cold. The windows, which had been empty and lifeless, now reflected a faint glow. And in one of those windows, I saw something that froze me in place. It was my reflection. Not just any reflection, though. The twisted version of me. The one I had seen in the mirror, with its hollow eyes and cruel smile, was standing there, watching me. Its grin stretched unnaturally wide, a mockery of my escape. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I'm out." I left. But the reflection didn't care. It just stood there, grinning at me from the window of the hotel. A sinking feeling spread through my chest, a realization too awful to accept. I hadn't escaped. Not really. The hotel hadn't let me go. It never would. I was still trapped. I stumbled backward, my legs shaky, my mind racing. How could this be happening? I had broken the mirror, faced my worst self, shattered its grip. But it didn't matter. The hotel wasn't a place you could just leave. It would always be with me, no matter how far I ran. I turned away from the hotel again, my heart pounding, and started walking, faster this time. But the sense of dread clung to me like a shadow. I didn't look back again, but I knew it was still there. I was still there. The hotel had marked me, and it wasn't finished with me yet. The road stretched out endlessly before me, but no matter how far I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still caught in the hotel's web. The mirror had shown me a reflection of my worst self, but maybe it had also shown me the truth. There was no escaping it. Not really. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to us. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more gripping tales and deep dives into the mysteries of folklore and the supernatural. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions about the story. Feel free to share them in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the unknown.